On this video, we're going to be looking at the various theories that there are about corporate strategy. Particularly, I'm going to be focusing on the Ansoff matrix, but I will be mentioning some of the others as well. Firms will develop strategies in order to meet their objectives. SWOT analysis will play a part in that because obviously if the firm knows its strengths and weaknesses and what opportunities and threats are around for it, then it will be able to adapt its strategy accordingly. It will have an impact on which markets that they choose to operate in and the products that it offers. And there's various things that will be influenced by. So, for example, there could be an opportunity, but it just doesn't tie in with the firm's objectives, so it decides not to try to meet that opportunity. Does it build on their strengths, their distinctive capabilities? What's the competitive environment that they're working within? What's the attitude of their leaders? Especially remember that strategies are developed by human beings, and some human beings like to embrace risk and some human beings are risk averse. And what's the environment that they're operating in, locally, nationally, or possibly globally? My favourite theorist of corporate strategy is Ansoff, because it's really good when you're looking at questions. So Ansoff, broadly speaking, looked at the potential for risk and the potential for reward. And broadly speaking, what he said was that the further you move away from what you are doing at the moment, there's a big increase in risk, but there's a big increase in potential reward. Why is that so important for questions? Well, if you can identify where on the Ansoff matrix a particular firm is in a question, then you've immediately got a paragraph. Let's say that you identify that they're moving into a new market. You've got a paragraph about the potential reward of that market. Say the market is China, a rapidly growing market. You're going to have some information to back that up. But of course, it's going to be risky. So you've got that sort of question. And in your conclusion, you can turn around and say how they can reduce their risk while taking advantage of that particular opportunity. If it's a 20-mark question, then again, you can look at the risks and potential rewards of both of the opportunities, and your final concluding paragraph is going to be the same. How could they perhaps, if they go for a safer option, try to make it more profitable? Or if they go for a riskier option, how can they reduce the risk? And if you approach it that way, you're unlikely to repeat yourself, which means that you're likely to move up into the higher levels, particularly level 4. Ansoff suggested that there were 4 potential strategies. You try to penetrate the existing market you're in a bit deeper. You try to look for a new market, so you try to develop a new market. You try to sell new products to your existing market, or you take the most risky one of all, which is trying to develop new products and sell them in new markets. And here it is in a lovely little matrix: market penetration, same products, same customers; product development, new products, same customers; market development, same products but different customers; diversification, both of them. And the closer you are to the top left, the safer you are, but the potential reward is lower. The closer you are to the bottom right, it's riskier, but the potential reward is a lot higher. So market penetration, same market, same product, but you're hoping to sell more. Reasonable examples would be loyalty cards that stores say set up, so they want the customers to come back and buy a bit more of what they already buy. Bog-offs, buy one get one free. Or in the case of the computer game Sims, when they launch extension packs, but essentially the extension packs are just a little bit more of the same. There's no fundamental change in the product. You can see there's about 20 different extension packs that they've launched and sold for Sims 4. So maybe they're trying to gain a bit of market share from their competitors. They're trying to get their existing consumers to consume more. That might involve a change in the marketing mix, for example, a bog-off or a loyalty card, or it might involve some form of extension strategy. So what are the dangers? Well, let's say that Tesco decide to make an offer on their loyalty cards. Well, Sainsburys are going to probably do the same with Nectar, so the competitors are likely to react. These tend to be relatively short-term things. The market might already be saturated, so they've actually got to win customers away from their rivals, which is more expensive than just getting in a bit more spending. And there's the danger of cannibalization. In other words, your customers might be buying a bit more of one product, but buying a bit less of another product from you. So what about market development? Well, that is essentially where you're selling your existing products, but to a new market. Greater risk, but potentially greater reward. So for example, you could be trying to sell globally, perhaps by developing your internet sales. You could be opening into a new geographical market. So for example, Tesco tried to move into America. You could be trying to develop new types of customers. You could say be selling a primarily male product, and you could be trying to attract females, or you could be selling to young people and you want to move up the age barrier, or you could be wanting to sell to a different ethnicity. So you could be looking at the demographic side. Again, in the case of Sims, they could develop new platforms. So you could play it on a PC, you could play it on a tablet, you could play it on an iPad, a phone, a PC, or a console. So how might you do it? Well, obviously you could enter an international market like with Tesco. You could change your promotional tactics to appeal to the different demographic, or you could open a new distribution channel. Again, the obvious one is you engage in e-commerce. So why is it risky? Well, obviously, if you're going to approach a new market, then you're going to have to engage in market research. That's a cost. It may well be that the new market doesn't want or understand the product that you sell. It may well be that you don't actually understand the new market. You might understand your existing market. The further you move away from that, you're less likely to understand it. And there's the danger that your existing customers, your existing demographic, will be alienated by you moving into the new market. So what about product development? Well, there we're essentially trying to sell to our existing demographic, but we're trying to sell them a new product. Again, examples, Sims 4 obviously replaced Sims 3, obviously replaced Sims 2, Civilization 5, FIFA 20, or potentially you can see up on the top left that there was demand for Sims to release a board game. So you could do it by launching a related or a complementary range of products to what you are currently doing, something that supports what you are currently doing. Or you could launch substantially improved versions of your existing products. So Sims 3 is substantially different to Sims 2, which was substantially different to The Sims, and Sims 4 is substantially different to Sims 3. So there's going to be a lot of costs involved in developing for that new platform. So what are the dangers? Well, obviously you need to engage in research and development to develop the new product. Do we understand the new product? Because you're launching something that you don't currently produce. Will our existing customers want our new product? How are the competitors going to react? Again, there's a danger of cannibalization. So say it may well be that Sims 3 has still got life in it, but you've just launched Sims 4. So customers who would have bought more Sims 3 are now going to move into Sims 4. So Sims 3 sales are going to go down. You're going to be shortening Sims 3 product life cycle, and potentially if you get it wrong, there's damage to the brand. If you produce a bad version of the product, then potentially you could lose out there. Again, game designers may sometimes launch really good versions of a game. Second version's okay, and the third one really is something that the customers don't want. So the most risky one, diversification, selling new products to a new market. So my example was going to be Sims Total War, except that I then realised that Sims have actually got a version of Star Wars. So how could they do it? Well, obviously they're doing both at the same time. So they've got research and development for new products and market research for the new markets, which means that the startup is going to be very, very, very costly. It may well be that we build on our strengths, but we adapt it in new products and new markets, or potentially we could simply acquire a new business that operates in a new market with new products. Other potential dangers are that if we try and both at once, we could well hit cultural problems, and potentially again that could dilute the brand name. Now, covering both theme 3 and theme 4, we could look at this in a global context. Broadly speaking, what we've said is true, but just a bit more so. So market penetration globally. Well, if you've already got a foothold in a particular market, then potentially you could expand that foothold. So maybe you operate in France, so maybe market penetration would be by perhaps hitting Switzerland or hitting Luxembourg. Product development, well, potentially you could tap into local expertise for research and development. So if someone else, some other country can do it better, then maybe you could use some of their skills. Market development, often that involves your rising star countries, your BRIC countries perhaps, or your missed countries. And obviously it's going to be easier if you're selling to a similar culture. With diversification, continues to be the highest risk strategy, particularly if you're in an international context, because you are more likely to make mistakes there. You're more likely to make cultural mistakes. This could be a good place to take a pause, because I'm going to go into some examples in a minute. So I'm going to look at the groceries industry, asking 3 questions about international development. Tesco's single biggest failure was when they tried to break into America. It was hopeless. Walmart was slightly more successful when they tried to break into Britain, and there are questions as to whether Sainsburys, with the approach that they've adopted, might be more successful in China. So we're looking at trying to develop their markets in an international context. Well, in the case of Tesco, they bought out an existing US supermarket chain called Fresh and Easy in 2007. 6 years later, they left with their tail between their legs when they'd made their biggest loss ever. £1.2 billion that venture cost them, and it only lasted 6 years. So where were their mistakes? Well, first of all, Tesco were fantastically successful at selling to Brits, and they assumed that the Americans were going to operate the same way, and the Americans don't. The Americans are incredibly big on coupons, and Tesco did not exploit that. The sort of customer service you get in American stores is different to what Tesco's was used to in the UK. So they basically tried to turn an American customer into a British customer, and it didn't work. Tesco have got a bit of form in this. They've also tried and not succeeded in Japan, China, Malaysia, South Korea, Taiwan and Thailand. So pretty much every time they try to move from the UK to abroad, it goes wrong. Now, one of the reasons why they do try to get into foreign markets is that they're actually restricted by competition laws from expanding much further in the UK. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when they make that change, it's going to be a good change. So what about that in reverse, when an American chain broke into the UK? Walmart bought out Asda in 1999. So they were using Asda's expertise and knowledge of the UK market to try to develop there. They kept the Asda brand name, so they didn't try to convert existing Asda customers into Walmart customers. However, even there, it didn't go terribly successfully, and for a number of years, Walmart have been trying to sell out. So they tried to merge with Sainsburys. That wasn't allowed by the competition authorities. And eventually they paid themselves some money. They gave themselves £1 billion of dividend, and then they sold the chain for nearly £7 billion in November 2020. So it was all right, much better than Tesco. They made a bit of money from it, but they still weren't that successful. Why? Perhaps because they didn't try to change things. So essentially they were getting a bit more of what Asda were already doing. Now, Sainsbury's in China is possibly more successful. So why China? Because it's a market that is rapidly growing, 33% market growth between 2015 and 2020 in this particular sector. Also in China, they are very big on online grocery sales. We don't do that as much in the UK. So from $40 billion in 2015, that's more than quadrupled by 2020. So why don't the Chinese middle class buy Chinese products? Well, they're worried about the safety of locally sourced food and drink, and they're more reassured when they buy Western products. Now, Sainsbury's exploited that. They jumped on that. So their marketing approach was emphasising their Britishness, their Westernness, best of British, so organic, taste the difference, little ones for small children. So they were trying to appeal to the sorts of markets and the sorts of customers that would be put off by buying local Chinese produce. In terms of distribution, remember both Tesco and Walmart had to buy up stores. They had to buy up the physical hardware. Sainsburys used the fact that Chinese people are used to buying online to distribute and sell online, but they didn't have to develop their own network or even their IT network. They use the Alibaba website that's already there that Chinese customers are used to doing to try to build. So perhaps Sainsburys are going to be more successful. I say perhaps because I haven't read much about them since about 2016 in that particular market. A really good example of the risky one, diversification, is Nintendo. Nintendo were founded in 1889 and essentially they produced playing cards. The background of this part of the presentation is one of their original playing card type games. They sold in Japan. They then moved into toys, again selling in Japan. And it was only in 1973 that they moved into video games and started to sell worldwide. Well, now in 2020, they sell over 20 million units of hardware a year, 170 million units of software. Their revenues are about £10 billion. Their operating profit is £2.5 billion. And the company is worth, in terms of equity, £11 billion. So clearly that's a case where they took a risk, but it paid off. A second real good example of success, Nokia. Founded in 1865 in Finland, and up to about 1990, primarily they were involved in cutting down trees, forestry, cables, rubber and tyres. They were slowly dipping their foot into electronics, but they were never known as being an electronics firm. They bought Mobira, which is a mobile phone company, and they came incredibly close to selling that just before this guy Jorma Alila, who was the CEO from 1992 to 2006, he made the decision to turn Nokia into a telecoms orientated company. He said there's no way we're going to sell Mobira, we're going to build upon Mobira. Again, you can see there how, the importance of the people involved. So by the year 2000, Nokia had a 30% market share in the mobile phone market. That was over twice their biggest competitor, Motorola. They had 55,000 employees. Their revenues were about 30 billion euros, and they had quintupled, gone up 5 times in 5 years, with a 2 billion euro operating profit. Now at their peak, they held more than a 50% market share. Obviously things went on a downturn for them after that, but for a while they were staggeringly successful, selling a new range of products into totally new markets. Finally, in this section, let's look at diversification, or possibly product development, but I think it's diversification, with Coca-Cola's involvement with Costa. Costa have been around in the UK since 1971. They're a British firm. They de-merged from Whitbread in 2018 and were almost immediately bought up by Coca-Cola. Whitbread knew that was going to happen in 2019 for $5 billion. Now Costa's incredibly big in the UK, 2,500 locations, less so in the rest of the world. So they've got 1,400 locations in the rest of the world, but particularly they've got a foothold in China where they had 450 locations. China has a rapidly growing coffee market. Coca-Cola have massively strong distribution systems in China. So the aim was to sell Costa via the Coca-Cola distribution system. So again, that could well be a success. Why do some people regard it as product development? Well, essentially, they'd say that they already sell a form of drink, they sell soft fizzy drinks, and now they're selling hot drinks. I regard it as diversification because I think it is a different market, but that's a matter for debate. Again, this could be a good place to take a break because I'm about to go into a totally different matrix. So Michael Porter's strategic matrix, Michael Porter's generic strategy, is approaching things from a slightly different viewpoint. And what Porter said was, broadly speaking, firms can either be low cost or differentiated. So Ryanair and Costco, known as low cost, differentiated Waitrose. So he was saying, be cheap or be different. Don't go into the middle of the road. Don't be unsure as to what you are, because people who walk in the middle of the road are likely to be run over. And that needs clear marketing messages. So, for example, the Marks and Spencer's message is not just food. It's Marks and Spencer's food. That is pretty clear. They are there to be differentiated. Tesco, slightly less so. Good food that costs less. Well, is it good or is it low cost? That's slightly a mixed message. But you'll note that Tesco are a lot more expensive, so are a lot more successful than Marks and Spencer's. So perhaps that would be a bit of counterbalance on Porter's strategic matrix. That's Porter in a matrix with the different points. And broadly speaking, the only difference is that Porter can operate both either in a mass market or a niche market. So you can adopt these two strategies in either of them. So if you're going to be a low cost firm like Ryanair, then obviously you've got to focus on your costs. You've got to be the cost leader. Price is usually the key element of the marketing mix. You're going to be going for a low price often. It means that you're going to focus on cost minimization. Ryanair are really big on this. For a while you could be disciplined if you were an employee of Ryanair, if you plugged your phone into one of their sockets for recharging. They looked at things like reducing the number of lavatories on the aircraft, or even having strapped in but standing up customers to be cheaper. Now, if you are low cost, that means that either you are likely to be low price, or if you're slightly higher price, it means that you've got higher profit margins. So either way, it's going to give the business a little bit of power. Differentiated strategy could also be mass or niche, and if you're differentiated, you're offering something different to the opposition. So the product has to be better than the competition. You might be exploiting its unique selling point. You might be exploiting a patent that you own. Your promotion is geared around creating desire, so people are prepared to pay that little bit more to buy something exclusive, to become loyal to that brand. And therefore your operational objectives are going to focus on research and development and innovation. Product portfolio analysis you've probably done elsewhere on your course with the good old Boston matrix. Essentially, you're looking at the range of products or brands that you control to identify where every single product is in its market. So the aim is to reach a wide audience through product and market development, to spread your risks. You're trying to grow, you're trying to identify gaps in the market and fill those gaps, and hopefully benefit from economies of scale. Again, a slightly weird and boring sounding part of the spec, achieving competitive advantage via distinctive capabilities. So this is where you are essentially looking at the expertise and knowledge of your leaders, your founders, the collective learning of the organization, its collective technical expertise, and hopefully that will lead to a competitive advantage. It focuses on three things: the architecture, which is unique to the business, which is the relationship with the key stakeholders, the customers, suppliers, the employees, whatever you regard as key. The reputation of the business based on customer experience, and the innovative qualities of that business. And hopefully you're developing something that others will find it very difficult to imitate. I think it's a bit more like the differentiation side of the Porter matrix. So the three questions when you look at what you are like: do your capabilities allow for market development? Do they provide noticeable benefits to the end user, and are they difficult to imitate? I think if you look at a company like Apple, then you can see how they are using their competitive advantage, they're gaining competitive advantage via their distinctive capabilities.